Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here. Don't forget to subscribe. And it's Sunday, so we are doing breaches of the week, and oh my god, is it absolutely insane. Some of the heaviest hitters in enterprise security, like Palo Alto Networks, Zscaler, Cloudflare, one of the largest, if not largest, credit unions in the United States, Navy Fed. AT&T had another data breach. Salesforce is having a terrible month the last 30 days, and on and on and on. This is absolutely insane this week. So thank you very much to Kristen S., Jacqueline Wolf, Hannah Wu, and John Bloyston, for sending all of these in, or most of these anyway. It's a huge, huge help. So with that, let's start in Nevada with Absolute Dental. They have 50 locations in Nevada: Vegas, Carson City, Reno, Sparks, Minden, and a whole bunch of others. And they just completed their investigation of a February 2025 cyber attack, and they had 1.2 million patients caught up in this. Everything that you would possibly think you could give to a dentist in terms of your health, your IDs, all this kind of stuff is all included in their data breach, and a small number also had financial account or payment card information exposed as well. So if you use Absolute Dental across the entire state of Nevada, you better check in. Moving on, U.S. delivery company On Track. They actually are about $1.5 billion in movement of deliveries every year, so they're pretty big. They had a breach between April 13th through the 15th of this year, impacting 40,000 individuals. Names, dates of birth, social security numbers, driver's license or state IDs, medical info, and health insurance information. Odds are it's going to be mostly their employees, but not fun. Moving on, chess.com. If you're like me, you like chess, and chess.com is the largest online platform for chess players, and they're saying attackers gain access to customer information through a file transfer tool that they use on their platform. Their notification they submitted to Maine and Vermont, they explain that 4,541 people had their personal information exposed to attackers who breached an unnamed file transfer application between June 5 and 18th of this year. And basically this was discovered on the 19th, and they called law enforcement. They wouldn't say what information was taken, but heads up if you are an avid chess.com player. Moving on, Navy Fed, the credit union, the 800-pound gorilla in the credit union room here in the United States, my homeboy Jeremiah Fowler has once again done his job and found a whole bunch of stuff, because Navy Fed had an unprotected 378 gigabyte database containing sensitive internal files linked to Navy Federal Credit Union. The database was found publicly accessible without encryption or a password. That's awesome, guys. Remember, Navy Fed is basically the one that serves militaries and their families around the world. They run 24/7, 365 because the U.S. military does too. So, Fowler's research revealed file formats including SQL file formats, GZ file formats, compression, all that kind of stuff, operational metadata, hash passwords, storage location, systems logs, internal usernames and emails in plain text, which could be weaponized for phishing or credential stuffing, Tableau business intelligence workbooks revealing database connection details, financial performance formulas, loan portfolio metrics. Although no customer data was visible in plain text, the degree of internal detail exposed could have served as essentially a treasure map for cyber criminals to plan phishing, further intrusions, all this kind of stuff. So obviously they're saying no customer data was caught up in that, which is great, but Navy Fed just opened up their service area for attack, and they're the largest credit union here in the United States. I think they are. Moving on. Columbia University, we're going to give you an update on this because according to their recent breach filing in Maine, they're now saying 869,000 individuals were basically caught up in this breach. And we are talking students, employees, applicants, and in some cases family members. Media outlets were also reporting the threat actor claimed to have stolen approximately 460 gigabytes of data from Columbia's infrastructure. So obviously that's a massive hit to that university that's been in the media lately over political woes. Let's just put it that way. Moving on, let's head on up to Canada and talk about financial services firm Wealthsimple in Toronto. Now, they disclosed a data breach after attackers stole personal data of an undisclosed amount of their customers in a recent incident. They stated the attackers did not steal any funds, did not compromise passwords, and they are ensuring everybody that your account is secure if you're using Wealthsimple. So, What they did take, apparently, was contact details, government IDs provided during the Wealthsimple sign-up process, financial details such as account numbers, IP addresses, social insurance numbers or SIN numbers, and dates of birth. So heads up to you, if you're in Canada and you use Wealthsimple, you might want to check in with the government because you're protected under PIPEDA, and they're probably going to owe you money. So, for the record, they also didn't provide any information on how the attackers gained access to customers' personal information or details shared, all of that. It seems to suggest they may have been caught up in Salesforce. Yes, Salesforce. I can't get away from Salesforce. Everybody's using Salesforce when you're talking about these large corporations. And so here we go. So let me give you an update on Salesforce because we just had another declaration of a data breach as a result of them, and that would be SaaS giant Workiva. And they've got a ton of customers like IBM and a whole bunch of other companies that use Workiva. So that's awesome. So we're going to see even more data breaches and fallout from that as well. And we're not done with Salesforce. But moving on, let's talk about AT&T again. And Jesus, dude, like I swear to God, like I cannot escape data breaches from AT&T because attackers claim to have live access to AT&T's infrastructure. This is not a repeat from their past data breaches. This is from like the last week. And so they essentially, this access allowed them to bypass two-factor authentication tied to specific phone numbers. The attackers allegedly impacted millions of AT&T users, and attackers basically, they included a post from the AT&T systems, and that database that they took appears to have phone numbers, owners' names, cities, states, carrier plans, device types, registration dates, last activity dates, SIM IDs, and device IDs. So that's awesome. And so heads up, I don't know if they accessed it or stole it, but either way, it ain't good for millions of AT&T customers. Heads up to you if you've got a mobile phone from them. Moving on. Let's head on over basically to the Teamsters, their local union, 25, specifically their fund, the Health and Services and Insurance Plan. Anyway, Local 25 uncovered unauthorized activity in their network by August 18th. Their review was completed and they identified basically data involved and the individuals impacted basically are getting notifications sent. We're talking names, social security numbers, member ID, health information, and or health insurance details, depending on, what you provided to that fund. So if you're a Teamster, part of Local 25, you definitely want to check in. Looks like you got hit. With that, let's go to our mini segment simply entitled, If You Just Spent Money on Cybersecurity, You Wouldn't Be Getting Sued, You Wouldn't Be Losing Your Reputation, and you sure as heck wouldn't be talked about here on this program. So with that, let's talk about PowerSchool. I've been talking about these guys since last year. Massive breach from 2024, still more fallout. And for this, we're going to the state of Texas because the state itself is suing PowerSchool. They're based out of California after that quote-unquote catastrophic breach exposed sensitive data of bazillion people. So it's everything when Texas is looking at this, from their bus stops to private medical information to over 880,000 teachers and students across the state. So Texas's Attorney General Ken Paxton filed that suit against PowerSchool this past Wednesday, alleging that it, quote, failed to implement even the most basic security features, including multi-factor authentication, adequate access controls, and proper data encryption, end quote. And thus, by neglect, they allowed for this breach of hundreds of thousands of Texans, and here we are. Not to mention millions of other people across North America, because it's used across the country, also in Canada as well. Absolutely nuts. Moving on, we got to talk about Salesforce, because Salesforce it's just the breach that doesn't quit. So you knew this was coming, but a Florida man has now filed a class action lawsuit, and this is interesting, on behalf of Farmers Insurance customers, claiming that his and others' data from farmers was compromised following a data breach involving Salesforce, which we've been talking about. So this complaint was brought by Malcolm Scott in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California, which is basically where Salesforce resides in San Francisco, on August 27th, naming Salesforce Inc. and various other unnamed parties as defendants. And so, by virtue of that, the lawsuits are starting, and this is going to be a huge thing. Now, remember, Farmers Insurance is one of an absolute metric ton of companies that are declaring data breaches as a result of this issue. And we're actually going to dive in to kind of the who, what, when, where, why here, because we are basically ending that mini segment. If Salesforce and PowerSchool had just spent more on cybersecurity, they wouldn't be getting breached, wouldn't be losing their reputation, and we wouldn't be talking about them here. But Salesforce is an interesting one. And so we're going to go to our finalies today. And I know this may seem shorter, but I have 5 finalies for you. This is a record for breaches of the week. I couldn't figure out which one was more interesting, so screw it. We're going to talk about all of these in depth for the rest of the time here. And so let's start with something called Salesloft Drift. Now this one, holy cow, because we are talking about declarations from Palo Alto Networks, Zscaler, Cloudflare, and a whole bunch more. And those 3 names, if you don't know, are some very heavy hitters in enterprise cybersecurity. So this is a big one. This is absolutely nuts. So Palo Alto, in their statement this past Tuesday, said, quote, "This supply chain attack impacted hundreds of organizations, including Palo Alto Networks." End quote. They then confirmed they had an incident, or rather that the incident, and I quote, "was isolated to our CRM platform. No Palo Alto Networks products or services were impacted, and they remain secure and fully operational. The data involved includes mostly business contact information, internal sales, account, and basic case data related to our customers." End quote. Now, Zscaler, they're the enterprise cloud access security broker, and they do a couple of other things as well. Their statement was similar, and they said, and I quote, "This incident involved the theft of OAuth tokens connected to Salesloft Drift, a third-party application used for automating sales workflows that integrates with Salesforce and their databases to manage leads and contact information." End quote. That's right. We're talking about Salesforce again. And now, the blog post from Cloudflare was pretty different from Palo Alto and Zscaler, and that Cloudflare accepted some of the responsibility for the incident. They also stressed that the breach came from a third party, but Cloudflare basically fell on the sword. They took the blame for having enabled that service. Quote, "We are responsible for the choice of tools we use in support of our business. This breach has let our customers down. For that, we sincerely apologize." And quite frankly, props to you, Cloudflare, on that one, because that's usually not the tone most take, but you owned it, and I respect that, and you're still pretty damn good as a CDN. So, what the heck is Salesloft Drift? And why are we talking about it here? And for that, we're just going to basically say, rather turn to an article from CSO simply entitled, and I quote, "Attackers steal data from Salesforce instances via compromised AI live chat tool." That's what Sales Drift is. Salesforce. This is a Salesforce breach. And Salesforce is also blaming Salesloft Drift. Right? So all of the Salesforce stuff I have been talking about for weeks and weeks and weeks and is turning my beard even more gray is because of Salesloft Drift. Here we are. But that's not, I don't even think, the most interesting thing that happened this week. So let's go on to the next one, because we have to talk about the UK government. I literally talked about this, I want to say it was a week ago or 2 weeks ago in that breaches segment, but if you recall, essentially the Ministry of Defense got a whole bunch of Afghans, something like 19,000 of them, exposed, which obviously if the Taliban gets a hold of that, they can kill a whole lot of people, because these are the 19,000 Afghans and their families that were actually helping the UK government, the US government, et cetera, when they were basically propping up the democracy, of Afghanistan for 2 decades. So the UK government is unable to calculate the total cost of their secret relocation plan that they set up following this leak, and that's according to the spending watchdog. Now, the Ministry of Defense estimates the cost of this massive breach and setting up a new scheme to relocate those lives, those lives that may be under direct risk of Taliban execution. They're saying it's going to be £850 million, which I believe is just over $1 billion US. But the National Audit Office, or the NAO, says the Ministry of Defense has not provided enough evidence to give it confidence in that figure, which does not include legal expenses or compensation claims that are likely to follow. You're uprooting somebody because you got them exposed. We're living in the time of lawsuits. Oh my God. So yes, this could be absolutely huge. Now, the Ministry of Defense said it was committed to transparency and, quote, "committed to honoring the moral obligation we owe to those Afghans who stood with us and risked their lives," end quote. And yeah, you do, and you should, just like the U.S. military should as well. And anybody that was basically using the Afghans, or collaborating with these Afghans to ensure that, they could maintain stability in the country prior to the pullout, and the Taliban took it over in a hot minute. So last month, it was revealed that the details of almost 19,000 people, as I mentioned, had applied to move to the UK in order to flee the Taliban, and those were leaked. And then that's the issue here, right? An official mistakenly emailed a spreadsheet that contained a hidden tab with information in 2022. It's just coming to light. It's a whole utter mess. And so with that, let's move on because we have no time to spare here. And our next finally is ambulance chasers. That's right, personal injury lawyers. And if you're here in the United States, you know there ain't nothing that they won't do for a buck. So a growing number of personal injury lawyers are now adding data breach lawsuits to their caseloads because they make money, and they're obviously going alongside traffic accidents, medical malpractice, dog bites, you name it, right? So the upswing is being fueled by a surge in cyber attacks as basically attackers become more sophisticated at breaking into businesses' systems with an ever-increasing cache of customer data. And so the lawsuits are going fast and furious. You know, every week I have a mini segment on who's suing who, right? Or who's paying out what. So driven by the rise of AI-powered phishing attacks, U.S. companies reported over 1,700 data breaches in the first half of 2025. That's the US alone, and we know that number is crazy low compared to the full year total of 3,155 reported in 2024 here in the United States. And again, those numbers are insanely depressed because most people do not, or organizations do not, declare data breaches for whatever reason. So far this year, companies have issued more than 165 million individual victim notifications, basically, and that's a huge thing. That's according to the Identity Theft Resource Center. And so by virtue of that, here we are. Now, I just kept thinking, because I'm here in Chicago, that this reminds me of a billboard that I used to see on the Illinois-Indiana border on the south side of Chicago. Anytime I was down there, I don't live on the south side, but it would say, literally, it was an attorney, and it said, and this is, I will never forget this, it said, just because you did it doesn't mean you're guilty. And I'm kind of getting the vibe here, right, for that, because this is going to be ambulance chasers left and right. And yeah, we live in a litigious society. The United States is a litigious society. And other countries are litigious as well. You know, Canada, Europe, Australia, take your pick, but not nearly what the United States is per volume of lawsuits. And so I think this is going to increase. And when you're moving it away from, let's say, the standard class action firms, and you know every ambulance chaser is getting involved here, that's a huge thing. And Lord knows somebody's probably going to sue me for calling them an ambulance chaser. I'm not talking about you, whoever's trying to sue me. So with that, let's move on to our next finally. And listen up, kids, because crime really can impact your salary, especially if you're a leader. For that, we're going to go down under and talk about Qantas, the largest, I believe, air carrier in Australia. And so here's a quick recap. If you recall, and I talked about it back then, I went and looked at my notes, Australian airline Qantas disclosed a cyber attack after attackers accessed a third-party platform used by their call center, stealing significant customer data. We're talking about scattered spider activity, that ongoing hacking group that was detected and contained. So Qantas confirmed that while the system is now secure, a substantial amount of data was compromised, and so customer service records may have been hit. Names, email, phone numbers, birth dates, frequent flyer numbers, basically anything that you would give an airline. If you're booking tickets, you're calling customer service, whatever it is. No financial data or passport details or login credentials, including passwords, were compromised, according to them as well. Qantas confirmed that the attackers stole data on approximately 5.7 million customers, obviously mostly Australian. I've flown Qantas, but mostly Australian. And here we go, right? So here's where this gets interesting, because in their latest earnings report, Qantas Group Chairman John Mullen announced basically a division to cut bonuses for the CEO and executive management. So Mullen said, and I quote, "Despite the strong performance, the board decided to reduce annual bonuses by 15 percentage points as a result of the impact of the cyber incident had on our customers. This reflects their shared accountability while acknowledging ongoing efforts to support customers and put in place additional protections for customers," end quote. Qantas' CEO, Vanessa Hudson, for the record, her pay was cut by $250,000, while the board citing shared accountability and efforts to support customers and boost protection. So, kids, crime doesn't pay, even if you're running a company that gets hit by crime. So this is a big issue. And I think this is actually really interesting, because this may be something that more boards of directors are looking at, picking up and saying, you know what? if we're going to tie executive leadership into essentially the quantification of loss here, that's going to be a big thing, because now it really motivates management to get their CIOs and CISOs in order to make sure the infrastructure is well maintained and well patched and well defended, et cetera, et cetera. And even then, as I'm just thinking about this, as I do breaches of the week, every week, we've got a huge amount of problem with supply chain issues. And Quan has just said it's not us, it was a third party. So yeah, I think this could be potentially a new day. Qantas may just have set the precedent for the modern world in terms of executive compensation directly tied to cyber attacks, or successful cyber attacks rather. So, this was an absolutely insane week, but hey, here we are. We made it. Not a lot of our data did. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please, please, please attempt to stay private, informed, and secure. Take care.